Hello, and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris. That, as always, is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if that sounds like something you want to listen to regularly, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Spotify, Apple, and rate, review, but most importantly, subscribe. If you do subscribe, you won't miss any of our episodes when we drop them on Mondays. Speaking of Mondays, it is one right now, and it is 4 p.m. Eastern time on Monday, and that means that we are live streaming on YouTube. Go over to the YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button on this very video, and then come hang out with us and comment and be a part of the show. We get so many awesome viewers every week that they leave comments, we talk about them, fun little back and forth. So you can be one of those people if you go over to the YouTube channel, A to Z Sports Nashville on YouTube, and subscribe there. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, A to Z Sports Nashville.com, and A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that Zach writes on the internet. Plus, well, no, I think that's it. I ran out of stuff to say. Okay. So, Zach, you and I went to the orange and white game over the weekend. They gave us press passes. We got to do the show live from the field, the Neyland Stadium field. And we had major technical difficulties. It was really fun for the people that watched. My computer overheated. Then the audio messed up. And then finally, like 8 or 9 minutes in, we got it ironed out for a solid like 25 minutes there where we were able to talk. But it was a good time, man. What's up, Zach?
Yeah, I'm not going to say we got it ironed out. That was pretty much all you leading the charge there. I was just in panic mode trying to figure out what to do, just kind of looking around aimlessly, and you were able to figure it out and find a much better location for us that worked out pretty well till we about got kicked off the field because apparently they were shutting things down and whatever. It looked like they were washing the field. It looked like literal soap that was on the field that they were going. It was like sudsy. Did you see the same thing there?
I did, and I don't. We were so close to it. We got like sprayed by whatever that was. It was some sort of foam that they were putting on the field. I don't know if it's some kind of protectant or some sort of like. I legitimately don't know. I mean, I like to care for my own yard, but I've never done anything like that. I don't know what it was, but of course they got that big budget over there for the grass at Neyland. So who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, you could tell the field, if you were there at the game and you saw the end zones, you noticed that the checkerboards weren't quite as crisp as you normally would see. I mean, sometimes in the spring game, they don't even have the end zones painted. It looked like they had just kind of left it there and let the grass grow up through the orange and the white, which you could see coming through is what made it look kind of sketchy. Or maybe it's just where they're letting the grass grow out a little bit for whatever spring maintenance purpose. But whatever the case, it was a good time and a great turnout for the spring game. Just an incredible turnout. I mean, me and you went down kind of into the stands on the visitors side to watch the quarterbacks warm up before the game started, and just making our way through the concourse was almost impossible. I mean, even 20 minutes before the game started, and we were trying to go back up to the press box, we had to go outside Neyland Stadium and walk around to get back to the entrance to the press box. So not a lot of places you have a turnout like that in April for a spring football game.
Yeah, it was really wild, and we're going to touch on the stuff that we didn't touch on in that live stream because it was a little short because we were on the field, because it was kind of a special thing. We didn't let go of all of our thoughts in that live stream from the field in Neyland Stadium. But if you haven't watched that, go over and definitely do watch that. Before we get into everything, I got to tell you about our amazing sponsors. First up, Superbook Sports. There's no better place to wager on your favorite sports than Superbook Sports. Go to superbook.com. Download the app today. Superbook Sports. Rattle and Snap Tennessee whiskey from Log Still Distillery. Make your own luck, just like Tennessee football's fast-paced Rattle and Snap offense. With Rattle and Snap Tennessee whiskey, Omaha Steaks get $20 off your order of perfectly aged steaks, juicy burgers, and decadent desserts with our promo code VOLS. That is VOLS. Omaha Steaks. And finally, Farm Bureau Health Plans for better coverage, better rates, and better service. FBHP.com/ATOZ is the place to go. Farm Bureau Health Plans. You may notice For the non-casual viewers here who tune into us more often, I am a skosh under the weather. Very responsible of me to hang out with Zach all day 2 days ago, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm getting over whatever this was. I think I'm good. And then the very next day, I was like hacking up a lung, and suddenly I was like, oh crap, I might be sicker than I thought. So that's cool. Apologies to Zach if I got him sick. We rode in a car together. That was not probably not ideal. So hopefully, if he gets sick later this week, just know it is all my fault, and I apologize profusely to him. But yeah, I like Ashton says in the comments. He says, "Take a sip of that whiskey." The great folks at Rattle and Snap Whiskey may have given me a cold remedy here, whatever this may be. But maybe I'll have to try that a little bit later. But overall, on today's show, it's going to be our main takeaways from spring ball. Then we're going to talk about basketball. It's really the complete lack of basketball news is what we're going to talk about. What's happening? What is going on with the basketball team? No news on any of the dudes who are deciding to stay or go. No news from the transfer portal. No news on anything. What exactly does that mean? Then we're also going to talk about some recruiting. And then we're going to wrap it up with the baseball team, which just got their butt kicked all over the place by Arkansas. So that was really fun. I just on that last game, I didn't even watch. They got down 6-0. Didn't want to watch. I'm not going to ruin my Sunday like that. So not great. But thanks to everybody for tuning in. Ashton, Nugs, Salem. We appreciate you all. As I said, go over to the comments and get in here because we're open and running. Whatever you may want to weigh in on the show, you can leave it there wherever you might be watching in the comments, and we'll talk about it. But before we get into our first topic of the day, which is going to be, and I'll give you time to think about this, Zach, your single biggest takeaway from the spring game. We hit on this from the field, but I think my answer has potentially changed here. I said it was the crowd, which was very cool, but actually I think I have a different one now. So we're going to get into that right after I tell you about the amazing folks at Superbook Sports. Baseball is back, and the push for the postseason is on for hockey and basketball. Make it all count this spring with Superbook Sports. Superbook Sports is the best wagering app around with a direct line to experienced bookmakers behind the counter in Las Vegas. Plus, get a $250 bonus when you sign up, deposit, and wager in the same day. Don't let spring pass you by without winning money with Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Superbook Sports. And I'll throw it to you, Zach. Has your answer to that question changed at all? Your biggest takeaway from the spring game? I'm not sure if I remember exactly what you said, but what was your top thing that you noticed?
I'm not sure I remember what I said on Saturday either, but after a couple of days of, looking over the spring game stuff and reflecting back on it, I think really the biggest takeaway for me is that it was just further confirmation of how Josh Heupel operates as a head coach. Sitting there watching that entire game, you realize that you realize pretty quickly that you weren't going to see a whole lot of excitement because Josh Heupel just wasn't going to show his cards. He's got new personnel, coming in this season, new quarterbacks, some new receivers, some different running backs he'll be able to use with Cam Selden coming in, Deshaun Bishop, some young guys that got a lot of run with the other guys out. Plus Dylan Sampson's a little more experienced now and could play a bigger role in 2023. But with the wide receivers out, everything surrounding that game, you were never going to see a whole lot of just craziness. You weren't going to see the trying to create mismatches with Tennessee's, own defense, the switch releases, the bunch format. We saw like maybe one or two bunch formations. I think maybe there was more at the end of the game when we were kind of walking around down on the field checking things out, but it just wasn't the typical Tennessee offense. And I think that was 100% by design. I think there were things that they worked on specifically, just like you would any other practice, because at the end of the day, it was the 15th practice of the spring. I mean, there was work to be done and they were working on those certain things. So obviously not what we're going to see. And I think Heupel really puts a lot of importance on what he puts on film. Like, I don't think he wants to give things away. I think he wants to create chaos and confusion in the meeting rooms for whoever their, Tennessee's opponent's going to be on a given week. And the more that he can confuse them by not putting stuff on tape or putting certain things on tape, and there might have been some of that too that maybe we didn't recognize that he did, that maybe some other coaching staffs will have to prepare for. And I think that's great. I mean, I know we've lamented the college football game at times and how coaches are overly secretive with their practices and stuff. But at the same time, I do think there is a chess match that you can play there. And I think Josh Heupel plays it as well as anyone.
I believe his exact words in the press conference after the game were, "This is not real football." I think that was a nearly direct quote from Josh Heupel in the post game. And that was absolutely true. And that's why I think my main takeaway has changed. I mean, I did love the crowd. It was absolutely unbelievable. You already said it here. It was to get to where you wanted to go anywhere in that game. It was absolutely shoulder to shoulder. Now there was kind of some reasoning for that. I don't want to say it was poor planning, because it wasn't really poor planning. I just think there was almost nothing you could do about it. But they had closed off with the south end zone, I think.
The side closest to the river.
Yes, and that was for construction. So you couldn't sit there. So the stadium was smaller than normal. And then tons of people were there, and every seat was general admission. And so basically, the people who were really early got to their seat. That was good. And then that started to fill up and fill up and fill up and fill up and fill up. And then suddenly there was really no seats in that bottom part. And like a bunch of people were coming in trying to get seats at the bottom, and they really just needed to go straight to the top. And so it got super, super cramped. I mean, we had to go all the way out of the stadium and over to get to where we needed to go. It was that crammed. It was crazy. And I love that. This fan base is getting something that it has long deserved, which is a great product on the football field. And that's phenomenal. Josh Heupel is providing that, and God bless him for that. It's so nice to have it finally be here again. And so, fans are kind of paying it back now, saying, yeah, we'll give you our $5. We'll come and give you our time. And so that was amazing. But I think my main takeaway is this. I tried to come up with sort of a normie take on the quarterback situation. That's the right word to use there. And maybe I have. I don't know. I'm sure plenty of other people have said this. I haven't listened to all the podcasts of everybody else, but probably my main takeaway is this. It's going to be touch and go if Joe Milton makes any mistakes this season. Because we said this in the post game. They didn't do enough with Nico to where fans are going to be calling for him to be the starter. At least I don't think so. And I think maybe they did that on purpose. Very bland with the playbook. You said it there. They're trying to hide their hand, not show too much. And so maybe it was purposeful in that way too, in that they were like, we're not going to create a quarterback controversy within this fan base here. But Nico looked good enough to where if Milton messes up, and I look to probably the Florida game primarily, because I think that Virginia team is going to stink out loud, and Tennessee should steamroll them pretty much no matter how Joe plays. But we'll talk about that when the season gets closer. But I looked at that Florida game, and if things are going haywire at that point, I think it's going to be full-blown get Nico out there. Nico time in Tennessee. And I don't know how you avoid that. The only way that they could have avoided that is having him not play in the spring game. And I think you would have forfeited a decent chunk of your attendance numbers if you did that. And so, man, it's tough. That's like, honestly, there's a ton to take away. We're going to talk about more of it. But I just think when you're talking about your main takeaway, that was one where I watched and I was like, ugh, he's good enough. I mean, that throw to Ethan Davis where he dropped it in right over his shoulder, man. Fans see that and they're going to be salivating if Overthrow Joe shows up. And so that's concerning, but also, as I said, kind of unavoidable, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we did see Joe overthrow, a couple of small overthrows there. But again, it's a spring game. It's not the wide receivers that he'll be playing with. It's just a practice, and you hate to you. I hate to make some huge judgment based on these one practice when you have 15 spring practices. You're going to have all these countless fall and summer practices leading into the season, and this is just one snippet of the work that they've put in. So there might have been a practice where Joe looked great and Nico didn't look great, or vice versa. Like you just don't know because nobody really gets to see that stuff. I am kind of surprised that they didn't at least let one of the wide receivers just kind of go on a go route, and maybe I don't know if you would tell a safety to back off or a cornerback to back off, but at least just go on a go route and see what happens. I mean, put one of your weaker cornerbacks and just let Joe Milton complete that long pass just to kind of give like, hey, yeah, that's the guy moving forward. Like I know that might be a little bit too like heady for maybe Tennessee to think about doing. Like they're more worried about getting their work in, like we mentioned, more so than probably fan perception. But I am kind of surprised that they didn't let a few of those fly, just for the fans, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say this. I mean, we got to go down onto the field and be around everything that happened afterwards. And obviously we were in the press conferences afterwards too. And if you observed that closely, and fans could have from the sidelines, and maybe some did, but if you observe that closely, and especially the press conference afterwards, it is very obvious that this is Joe Milton's team.
Mm-hmm.
And so with my point being said, I mean, my biggest takeaway is you will have fans screaming at the top of their lungs for Nico if Bad Joe shows up. But I also think if you watch closely down on the field, in the locker room, this is his team. He has put in his time and he acts like a leader and is a leader, and that's going to mean probably that his leash is decently long. I have no idea what it is. It's not like I'm behind closed doors with Josh Heupel, but I would just bet, they're not going to quickly just go, oh, well, the fans want it. Here's Nico. We're pulling Joe, unless he's just egregiously bad, and I don't think he's going to be. But you see the fine points of it on the sideline, in the locker room, in the press conference. Joe's the guy. Nico defaults to Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Like he looks up to him in a big brother way. And so I think it's going to give Joe a pretty decent leash there. But who knows exactly what that means as far as, it's Josh Heupel's call. So who knows exactly where he goes with that. But just, there's the Colts. Sorry, Zach, maybe. But, I just think I walk away thinking that also, along with the fact that fans are going to be calling for Nico if Joe doesn't bring it. But, that's just like my top one. There are plenty of other ones, some that we mentioned. Ethan Davis really showed out. Cam Seldon really showed out. Who else? From Carnes, the running back.
Deshaun Bishop.
Deshaun Bishop showed out, and he, I said that in the post-game show. If we end up seeing him this season, that means somebody got hurt. But I like the kid a lot. I like that he's in the room. Defense, it's hard to take a lot away because the offense was just a shell of itself. Top 4 wide receivers weren't playing. I mean, none of the top talented wide receivers were playing. Neither of the top 2 running backs were playing. There's just not a lot to take from the defense because even, at defensive back where we really, really want to see improvement, well, they were going against dudes that probably aren't going to play that much if everyone
they weren't challenged a ton, to be honest.
Yeah. And because people walked away saying, oh, well, the defense really looks improved. And I go, yes, they did. That's absolutely true. But how much weight do I put on that? I think the thing that I can walk away and say with certainty is that there is a ton more depth with the defense. But can I say with any kind of certainty that they're super improved? No, because I don't think we really saw them play any kind of high-level competition there, just because of the nature of what that was. But maybe you have a different take on the defense.
I mean, it was pretty much the same. I thought the run defense looked really good, but also they were just kind of running between the tackles. It didn't seem like they were making a lot of changes with the call at the line where they're reading the defense the way they would in a regular season game. They were just trying to get the running back some carries, and then we saw a couple decent runs, but we saw a lot stopped at the line or shortly, right behind the line. But that was to be expected. The run defense was good last season. That's not a surprise. We expected that. What we really wanted to see is if the defensive line to get pressure with the front four and get to the quarterback faster than that they can find a receiver downfield to really allow the secondary to have some, not have to be out there for 10 seconds, 6 seconds, however long a play lasts, trying to defend some of these elite receivers. And we just didn't get to see that because of the offensive play calling.
Yeah, some of the comments here are kind of in agreement with us here. Salem, he says, I think Joe would have looked much better if he had his wide receivers in. Pretty much had to go against the first team secondary with second team wide receivers. Absolutely. Elias says, how many of Milton's incompletions were still good throws? He was definitely not given huge windows. Absolutely. As far as the offense goes, I hope nobody is fretting over the fact that, there was only 17 points or whatever was the winning. It
and
was
like
an
Joe Milton said
of that offense.
And like Joe Milton said after the game, and also going to what Josh Heupel said that you mentioned, it wasn't real football. Joe Milton mentioned that too. Whereas they didn't really get to improvise at all because some of those sacks where they just touch, they're basically playing two-hand touch with the quarterback. A lot of those aren't sacks. A lot of those you get out of. We see that all the time where you think that the quarterback is going down. You think that the defense has them and somehow they get out of it. We didn't get to see if Joe Milton's improved in that area, what kind of plays he could have made happen when he's on the move or whatever the case may be. It was just so much that we did not get to see. We got to see a little bit of that from Nico on that one throw to Ethan Davis down the sideline, and a couple other times you got to see his ability that I thought was good for a kid that should still be in high school. I thought he had good vision and knew when to escape the pocket and when to get on the move and try to find somebody down the field. But even then, with the way the game was called, because wanting to protect the quarterbacks, you still did not get to see his full skill set. And I think that's part of the reason why Gaston Moore, just kind of the story coming out of the game, why he kind of looked, folks thought he looked the best. Well, the game was kind of suited to his style. Like that's kind of that's what he's going to do. If you get to a point where Gaston Moore has to play, the offense would probably be a little bit more like what we saw in the spring game and not quite as exotic as what you would see with maybe Milton and Nico in there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Nugs says on Joe Milton, Joe went 9 for 13. 3 of those were drops. He's the man until he's not. Let's relax on Joe. Completely in agreement there. Me saying that the fans will go crazy for Nico if Joe screws up is me just saying that. I'm not saying I'm going to be one of those people. It depends on how Joe plays.
It always happens. Yeah. If Nico was not on this team right now and Taven Jackson was still on this team and was the backup, it'd be the same situation. It's all, yes. The backup quarterback's always a superstar, and you want to see him in the game. It doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah, he's when your starting quarterback is screwing up, the best guy on the team is your backup quarterback.
Yeah,
that's always true. Tennessee fan. In recent years with Pruitt and going back to Butch, we knew that life well when we were having to watch, JG go out there and throw a bunch of picks and look ridiculous, and it turns out the guys behind him, weren't any better. We just thought they might be. But otherwise, with the spring game, was there anything else, Zach, before we hit some other stuff with football? We're still going to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting comment here from Salem. Do you think there's a bigger need at tight end with the first string dropping the balls left and right and with Ethan Davis being hurt? Yeah, the Ethan Davis injury is definitely the worst thing that came out of that spring game because he easily looked maybe the best of anybody on the field at skill positions. I really looked like, okay, this guy can be a star in the SEC. He can be an NFL player. He's that type of talent. Hopefully he's okay for fall camp. It's tough to know the exact timeline. Obviously that's the hope, and he might play more than we expected. You usually don't expect a freshman tight end to play that much because there's so much responsibility that a tight end has beyond just catching the ball. But the thing with Tennessee's offense is, they used tight ends last year because of their personnel and what they wanted to run and went with more 3 wide receiver sets. They're not opposed to going with 4 wide receiver sets. And we've seen that this spring with some comments that Kelsey Pope has made, where it really just depends on the personnel. And if they feel like the tight ends aren't exactly where they want them to be, then maybe you see Brew McCoy, Squirrel White, Ramel Keaton, and Dante Thornton on the field all at the same time more than we expected. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I don't know if they're going to go portal hunting for a tight end this soon, because it's in this offense, there's just so much that you have to learn. You have to have good chemistry with everybody on the, from the quarterback to the receivers, and knowing where to go and knowing where to be. It would be a lot to go get somebody in May, I think, and expect them to play a big role this season.
I agree. Yeah, the tight ends outside of Ethan Davis is very exciting. And, I think with that injury, it looks like it's trending collarbone. I don't know that anything's come out officially there yet or even will. But if it is just collarbone, he'll be back for the season, should be. And yeah, I agree. It's such an important piece to that offense, and it didn't inspire a ton of confidence. I mean, it just didn't. After Princeton Fant was so fun and really had a special season last year. But of course, you think back. I mean, did Princeton Fant have a magical spring game last season? Honestly, I don't know if he even played. What he did, who knows? It's a spring game, so I will put it that way. I'm not sure what they're thinking behind closed doors as far as the tight ends go, but I know that Josh Heupel in this offense put a ton of value on the tight ends, and that they're trying very hard. I mean, it's why they went so hard for Ethan Davis. He's a very highly rated tight end. I mean, they need good guys at that position. But Ethan Davis getting back, I think, could be big. I could see him playing. He's young. Not sure if he would be a blocking type dude. But I mean, I think you saw in that game, like, he has the ability to play immediately for Tennessee if he has his health. So
I still think you're going to see a lot of.
time.
I still think you're going to see a lot of Jacob Warren on the field, just because that guy knows the offense so well.
Yeah.
And we've heard him just talked about like another coach, and he can have guys where they need to be if there's any confusion. Since, I mean, it is, you bring in Dante Thornton in, Squirrel White, who didn't play, played a lot last year, but didn't play as much as some of the other receivers. Young running backs, new offensive line, just having a veteran out there like Jacob Warren that's not the quarterback to kind of help get everybody where they need to be and make sure everything is going the right way, kind of an on-field coach. I think there's a lot of value there. Like, Jacob Warren's probably not going to be an NFL guy. Hopefully he improves this season and gets even better. I think he's a good player. I think he does a lot of little things that you don't really notice or don't show up in the box score necessarily. So I do think he's a valuable person to have on this team and to see significant snaps.
I agree. Well, I'll throw this to you to wrap up the football conversation here, Zach, before we get to recruiting. Try to think exactly how to phrase this. So for the rest of the offseason, spring ball, obviously over. We're not going to see much outside of recruiting for the rest of the spring and summer.
Yeah, until early August, probably.
Yeah, this is really it. R.I.P. Sweet football. We'll see on the other side. But what are you looking for during this stretch, this dead stretch? Is it that you are looking to just hear nothing? That can be a good sign that you hear nothing. Or is there something that you want to see with the team when fall ball rolls back around and you go like, oh man, they've really improved there. They've done this, they've done that. Where do you want to see some emphasis laid with this football team over the offseason?
Yeah, I think there's two things, and one of them is something that Josh Heupel mentioned, and it'll kind of be tough to notice. But first off, stay out of trouble. Don't get into any controversies. Don't do something that's going to get you suspended, kicked off the team. Anything that's going to generate a headline. Obviously that's. I'm not looking for negative headlines. You don't want to see that kind of stuff. Secondly, Josh Heupel talked about a lot of guys needing to bulk up still, and that's kind of the focus for the team, is putting some more mass, some more muscle through the summer, working out, just becoming a more physical team and a team that can hold up in the trenches against teams like Georgia. I mean, it's not just this program has gone from, okay, you expect to win the game against Florida, you expect to win these games against Kentucky and some of these other teams that are pretty decent in the SEC. But now, their focus needs to be on beating Georgia, beating Alabama consistently. That's the only way you're going to win a national championship. And trust me, that's Josh Heupel's goal. I mean, that he is not we're building this thing. We're trying to make this program relevant again. I mean, he's going out there to win a championship in 2023. Whether it happens or not, we'll see. You know, you can't predict the future, but make no mistake, his goals are set pretty high, and he knows to do that. His team's going to have to be a little more physical, a little bigger to go head to head with Georgia and Alabama, and maybe in Ohio State or some of these other teams that you could see in a playoff possibly.
Yeah, I kind of have two things too. Those are good points. I mean, first, it seems very obvious. We didn't see anything real with this offense. You somehow have to find a way to make this offense at least an approximation of what you had last year. That was magic. You had even after injuries, I mean, that offense was magic. They found a way. So I believe this offseason they can find a way. I believe in Joe Milton and his ability and Josh Heupel's ability to work that offense around Joe Milton and around the tight end situation and around whatever may happen there. And so that one is completely obvious. Then I think one would be making sure your depth guys are real guys, that they're not, you have warm bodies now, and that's amazing. And it's kind of to that point of like bulking guys up and some things like that. If your depth pieces are freshmen, which at some positions that is the case, make sure they get that bulk on them. If your depth pieces are a little further along and maybe even upperclassmen, make sure that they're prepared and that they are at least near where the starters are, because it's great to have depth, but if your depth comes in and is useless, what good is it really doing you? Because it has been an exciting prospect during this spring football, and Heupel's brought it up a ton. Like, they finally have the guys, but will that translate into, like, if you have a similar situation last year where you have a bunch of injuries in the secondary, will that translate into the guys behind them still playing well? That has to happen for Tennessee to go the long haul in a 12-game regular season, because that's, man, you get beat up, you're going to need that depth, and so they got to be the real deal too, as much as the starters. So that's kind of what I would say.
How refreshing is it that you're talking about Josh Heupel praising the depth, and some of the other coaches have as well, entering year 3 when it was year 5 of the Butch Jones era in 2017, and they were still talking about trying to build depth and using that as an excuse. It's so nice to not. I mean, Tennessee could still use more depth. They're still not where Georgia and Alabama is. They're not. I mean, they're much better off than they were 2 years ago, better off than they were a year ago, but they still have a little ways to go to build that kind of depth. But you don't hear that coming from the program. You don't hear that at all. And that is so refreshing to hear.
No excuses. We don't want to hear them. They don't want to give them. Just go out and win these football games.
Yep. Everybody deals with stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's playing a 12-game season. You're not special. All right. I think that is it for the spring game talk. Now, moving on to recruiting. Tennessee got a commitment from Idris Farouk, a safety, and we're going to talk about that right after I tell you about our great sponsor, Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey. Nothing goes better with a Tennessee sports victory than an awesome whiskey. And if you watch the post-game shows with myself and Jonathan Crompton during this past football season, during those 11 wins, we like to take a drink of this here very awesome whiskey, Rattle and Snap Tennessee Select Straight Whiskey. Log Still Distillery has released a new Tennessee whiskey product line called Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey, named after a long-forgotten game of chance. Rattle and Snap is a whiskey for those who make their own luck. There's a 4-year and an 8-year version. This is the 4-year. They're both awesome. They both go great in cocktails. They both are great straight up. So go get your hands on some. And also, I guess this is proof right here. They also look great on the shelf. It's a beautiful label. You can find it in across the state of Tennessee. Rattle and Snap is also available in Kentucky, Indiana, and Mississippi if you live there. Run, don't walk. Get yourself some Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey for those Tennessee victories, and follow Rattle and Snap on Instagram at Rattle and Snap Whiskey. Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey. Now we're supposed to give the Rattle and Snap Tennessee stat And I guess I can give you this about Idris Farouk. He is a 3-star, number 55 safety in the 247 sports rankings, number 561 nationally in the 247 sports composite. In the composite, he's the number 47 safety in America, class of 2024 from Baltimore, Maryland. There's some stats on him right there. And this was just after the spring game. There were a ton of visitors at the spring game, and we can talk about that too. But what'd you think about this pickup, Zach?
I mean, it's exactly what Tennessee needs, a versatile safety that can defend against the run. He can cover. Super athletic guy. It's also another example of Tennessee staff evaluating. I mean, they offered this guy like a year ago or maybe over a year ago. He's seen his stock rise. They saw something they liked early, kind of like the Nathan Laycock deal where they were on him early. And then later on, the evaluations from the recruiting services kind of catch up, and you're like, okay, this guy's really good. So should give you a lot of confidence about this staff's ability to evaluate talent. Obviously, they're pretty much nailing that, I think, and it's just fills a position of need. It's kind of interesting. Seems like they've got a couple of guys from Baltimore lately. I know Dante Thornton is originally from Baltimore as well, so maybe that can become a nice little pipeline for him and go up there and rob some players from some Big Ten teams up there.
Please, because the Big Ten doesn't deserve them. That's not a real football league. You can come down here to the South and actually play with some real teams. No, I like this a lot. It does kind of go to our point last week where do I like these pickups? Absolutely. I think this kid is good. There's that same kind of talk around him where it's like, okay, you give him another year. He's probably that stock's going to go higher than what he's got at the moment. But it isn't that elite recruit that you're going to go and consistently beat your Georgias and Alabamas with. But the story to me at this point with guys like this is just that you work with what you have in front of you. And that's what Josh Heupel and his staff, I think, are doing. Obviously, on defense, there is a bit of an element of probably a harder sell than that offense with Josh Heupel, because obviously your defense plays like 90 plus snaps in some games and kind of, especially this last season, becomes a villain when maybe sometimes they shouldn't. I'm not going to give them a pass on something like the South Carolina game. Don't give up 63 points ever. But in some other games, they just get worn ragged because of the style of play, and they just can't hold up at the end. Like Purdue in Heupel's first year in the bowl game, like something like that, where they just at the end of the game, they got nothing left in the tank, and so they can't cover anymore. And so it can be a tough sell, and you're still getting kids in the door. And as far as recruiting goes this past weekend, with all the recruits that were here, and there were some important ones around Camarion Franklin and some of the other guys. I'd have to go back and look at the list, but some important dudes that you want. That's got to be an impressive thing that they saw this weekend, and that's really good. I mean, it's a spring game. I don't know what the attendance numbers were across the league for spring games, but I got to think that Tennessee was at the very top or close to the very top in America. And that has to be super impressive. Also, they get to see the family atmosphere. They get to see everything that happened in a little bit more of a laid back setting rather than an actual game week where, Tennessee's going to play Alabama. Well, it's great that those recruits got to see that Alabama game, but at the same time, you're getting a very different experience here because there's not that game week pressure going on and all the things that kind of come along with that. So I'm excited overall. Just keep doing what we're doing and keep chugging along. And there are guys in the pipeline right now that Tennessee is talking to, and I think they'll land some of these blue chips, but it's going to be a little while longer, I think.
Yeah, I think your point about the spring game and recruiting, Tennessee's really kind of getting on a level with Alabama and Georgia and in that range where you go to a spring game and you got a lot of fans. You got fans that know the recruits when they see them. You've got former players. I mean, there are a ton of former players there on Saturday. And Josh Heupel said there was over 300 in for the weekend. But you got guys like Hendon Hooker just walking around, Jawan Jennings just walking around, Ramon Foster, Alante Taylor, who had a great year for the New Orleans Saints. Like all these NFL players just kind of walking around amongst a lot of these recruits, and they're just kind of all mixing in and seeing each other. And I mean, that's huge. I mean, that's a huge selling point. And then the family atmosphere, they definitely saw that. We saw it. I know we talked about it on a Saturday during the live stream, but you had players, families of players that were wanting to take pictures with like Nico and Joe Milton and some of the bigger name players. And these guys didn't hesitate. I mean, at one point, Brew McCoy was holding somebody's kid for a photo and was just, handing the kid back into the stands. I mean, it's seriously that. You saw Joe Milton holding kids. I mean, is that kind of environment where it really is this family atmosphere where even the parents of these players, you can just tell the relationships that they have with other parents of players, and they all get along. Families kind of out there on the field. It's a great vibe. I mean, the vibe in general. We've been to a ton of these spring games. The first one I went to and covered as media was Butch Jones' first spring game back in 2013, and just the vibe. And not that the vibe there was ever bad, especially those early ones. Going to the spring games. But this spring game felt different to me. It felt a lot different. There was this energy in the air where it was just like, it's like going to a family cookout where you really want to be there and everybody's happy and smiling. It's just a good time. Like it had that kind of feeling to me.
I think there's just real belief again. And you can tell from the fans down to the players. The players believe in what Heupel is doing. Obviously, Heupel believes in himself. And the fans believe in everything that's happening there, and it all just flows together. It creates a real, it's the right word, like synergy when you're there. You can just you can feel it. It's like tangible in the air, where there's not this air hanging over everything of just like, hey, we won. With Butch, it was like we won 9 games last year, but also, we lost to Vandy to end the season. Was it really that good? Is Butch really the guy? Is the blah, blah, blah? There was just always this nonsense kind of hanging over everything. And right now with Heupel, like obviously things can take a turn, but he's shown this fan base like it's okay to really believe in what's happening with this football team, with this athletic program. And so, man, I think that's it, so different, so refreshing, so exciting. I love it. But there was a comment right here. Salem, he asks, who do y'all think will be the best chance to be the next splash blue chip recruit to commit to the Vols? Lots of developmental players lately, it seems. That's a good way to describe them. Developmental players, guys that they're not there yet, but the potential is there. That has been who Tennessee has been getting lately. A couple of offensive linemen last week.
I mean, they did get a 4-star quarterback that's a top 60 player, a couple of weeks ago. So it hasn't all been developmental guys.
According to the 247 Sports Composite, the number 1 quarterback from the state of Georgia committed to Tennessee. So I would say that was the last one. You would call him borderline blue chip. I mean, you have the wide receiver, not Kamarion Franklin's defensive line. It's Ryan Wingo, wide receiver. I think there's a chance there. Franklin, some of those guys, I'll say I'm not VolQuest. They would really be the ones to kind of give you like they go and text those kids and talk to those kids and do all of those things. I can only tell you so much, but I do think from everything that I've seen, that is coming. This class will not go out hanging only on 3 stars. That's not going to happen. Obviously, they've already gotten 4 stars like that quarterback and some other guys. But it'll come around again because Tennessee had such a great year last year. I mean, you're going to get guys. One that I like, Wingo, a wide receiver. I think you're going to get a special wide receiver in this class. It just seems almost inevitable because of how great the set of wide receivers has been under Heupel, right? That has to happen.
Especially if Hyatt and Tillman go pretty high in the draft in what 2 weeks or a little over a week from now.
Absolutely.
One other thing about the recruiting that I've kind of noticed, I guess, this past couple of weeks is Tennessee has like 9 commits in their class right now. They're ranked number 7 in the nation. I don't know what the exact numbers were a year ago, but it felt like the class was nearly full. Like we were talking about, like, they just have a couple more spots left to fill. At one time, Alabama was ranked like way low because they had 3 or 4 commits. A lot of these bigger name guys don't commit until later. And to me, that tells me that, yeah, Tennessee's going to be in the mix for quite a few talented guys that other top programs are going for. Obviously, you have to go land those guys to round out your class, but they're getting more in line with the way some of those top 5 recruiting classes are built, where a lot of the guys kind of come on late.
I think a big one would be like an Edwin Spillman, in state. That could be one coming up. And yeah, to your point, they typically commit later.
Yeah, like Alabama has 5 commits right now. So
Yeah,
Tennessee's kind of just above them. Whereas a year ago, there was this wild variance, and a lot of Tennessee, they fell down. I don't know what Tennessee ended up with, like the number 10 class maybe last year, when they were top 5 for a while, and they fell down because they were propped up a little bit by volume more than rate. I mean, they had a great class, but that was why it fell down to 10th, where it had been top 5 for a while.
Let's see. Some of these other ones, you're from just from the state of Tennessee, just looking, you already have Caleb Beasley. Boo Carter, everything that I've read says, there's definitely other teams in the mix there, but he's probably coming to Tennessee as 4-star. Edwin Spillman, 4-star, he's probably coming to Tennessee. There's some of these other guys, and it just takes more time. So
I think Boo Carter's kind of enjoying, nothing wrong with this. I think he's kind of enjoying the recruiting process and isn't really in a hurry to shut all that down, but it does feel pretty strongly that he's going to be at Tennessee.
Yeah, I think so. And that's obviously that's imperative. You got to get the best guys out of the state of Tennessee if you're going to be the head coach of Tennessee here.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're Jeremy Pruitt. He never really cared about that. But otherwise, as far as recruiting goes, that really was the bulk of it. I mean, it was a big weekend with visitors and such. But again, that's not we weren't over there talking to all of them, trying to schmooze with the recruits and get the drop there. There's 10 other guys that do that as a literal job, and I'll let them do that. But otherwise, anything else before we move on from football? We're going to get into this basketball side. What is Santiago Vescovi thinking? Maybe Triple J, where are they at? We want to talk about that. But anything else with football before we move on, Zach?
Now, unfortunately, I think that kind of wraps it up. So we're going to close the bed, hopefully on football till August, because like you said, or like we said earlier, if anything comes up between now and August, outside of just a few little things here and there, it's probably not good news. So hopefully it's quiet, but it is disappointing to kind of see it go dormant for a couple of months here.
I know, and we've already said it. We, as much as we want to have more stuff to talk about, let's just keep it low key.
And,
no arrest.
No arrest for sure. As Mr. Jones mentioned, Nico's little brother Madden, he's not committed anywhere yet, and I'm sure Tennessee will strongly be in the mix there too. A 2025 guy, even though they have a 2024 guy.
I like that Mr. Jones. He a big Titans fan. He's been mentioning, imagine if Hendon Hooker went to the Titans, they would gain 100,000 fans instantly. It would make up for, at least partially. I've always said the Titans were so ill-timed. They came into existence right when Peyton went into the league, and every Tennessee fan followed Peyton to Indy. That that was the move. There was no NFL team for the fans here, and suddenly the NFL team became Peyton's NFL team. I think that could make up for it a little bit, but I think it would take him going there and becoming the starter, though. Like he would really have to do it for that to finally translate over where that's where a lot of Tennessee fans became Titans fans.
Well, it's just like Josh Dobbs being in with the Titans last season, those 2 starts. I mean, he generated a ton of excitement for those 2 starts, and he looked good at times. But if he played the whole season and went, 6-11, that excitement's eventually going to die down if you're not winning a bunch of games. And that's not to say that's what would happen with Josh Dobbs if he would have been the guy. Who knows? He's never really had that opportunity to be a long-term starter. But, yeah, you definitely have to win games. Titans would make some sense for Hooker. It's going to be fun, not to get too much on the draft, but it's going to be fun to watch that draft unfold because I think it's going to be one of the wildest ones yet. I think there'll be lots of trades, lots of jockeying. There's lots of teams that make sense for Hooker. The Titans, the Lions, the Saints, the Seahawks. A lot of these teams that have veteran quarterbacks that aren't probably their long-term guy where you could draft Hooker and let him sit behind them for a little while, maybe a full year, and maybe, give him a shot next season to start. It'll be interesting to see if somebody jumps up into the first round to grab him to get that 5th-year option attached to him, or if they wait a little bit, he falls. And also with Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, I'm very intrigued to see is the hype real and they go top 10, or they do like Malik Willis last year and slide maybe, late first, second. I don't think they'll go to the third round like Willis, but that's something to watch.
That will be a topic for next week. 10 days from now, it's going to be the NFL draft, and we're going to talk about all the balls in the NFL draft next week. Give you a little cliffhanger there. And then obviously the week after that, we'll talk about where they go and what it means for Tennessee also. But it's April 27th, I think, is the start.
Yeah, a week from this
draft.
Saturday.
Yep. In Kansas City, I think.
Yeah. It's not Nashville, but it should be fun in Kansas City, I would think. That's a good city, but it's going to be hard to top that draft in Nashville.
I've never been to Kansas City. Never had a reason. Never really been to any of those. Nebraska, Iowa. Never been to Iowa.
Flyover states.
I hate calling them that though. There's cool stuff there. There's cool stuff in all those states. But that's what I've done. I have flown over those states my entire life and never gone to them. I've gone to most of the West Coast and all of the East Coast, but never there. Anywho, all right, we're going to talk about basketball and the complete lack of news from basketball and what it might mean right after I tell you about Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau Health Plans have been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200-plus locations across the state of Tennessee. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Now, I wish I had news to give here. I wish I could say Santiago Vescovi is coming back. Josiah Jordan-James is coming back. Julian Phillips is coming back. None of that has happened. And, you can read the tea leaves as much as you want to. Josiah had a little bit of a cryptic tweet this past week. You've heard essentially nothing from Scovey. You've heard nothing from the transfer portal. There were a couple of transfer guys in town this weekend. Neither of them committed yet. With our luck with this show, maybe during this segment, one of them will commit. Who knows? But it just hasn't happened yet. I've seen some Tennessee fans kind of going like taking the black pill on this one, where they're going, Barnes is giving up. We're not getting any of those guys back. We're not getting transfers. It's over. Blah, 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 blah. Where do you stand, Zach, on what we've seen so far or haven't seen so far from the basketball team?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in wait and see mode. Let's see how this plays out, because I don't really know yet how this calendar is going to work every year with basketball in the transfer portal. It's still a work in progress. I mean, we're even seeing the changes with football and how these guys make their decisions. So I don't know what Barnes is. I don't know what his philosophy is on this or his approach. I would assume that he's waiting to see if Vescovi and James and Phillips come back before he goes to the portal. Maybe you have to. I'm not sure how that works out. I think it seems like Vescovi, Volquest reported that he's leaning towards returning to Tennessee. So that would, obviously that would be a positive, I think, for Tennessee. With James, it's less clear. With Phillips, it's less clear. Wouldn't be surprised if both of those move on. And then we'll see about those. I know they had a couple of visitors, like you mentioned, one from Northern Colorado, one from Harvard. Would be nice to get either of those guys. The guy from Northern Colorado averaged like 20 points a game last season, so surely you could find a role for him, and he could be an asset to Tennessee basketball. But for me, I'm just really in wait and see mode. I mean, maybe it's too soon after the end of the season to get too worked up over it. Perhaps that's the case, but I don't think it's anything to worry about yet.
I think the most disappointing thing that I've seen is that kind of across the board, everyone has been speculating that Julian Phillips won't stay. And that just absolutely kills me, because I look at him as an NBA talent. It's going to be years, in my personal opinion, it'll be years before he's able to carve a spot out in the NBA. And by that, I mean like 2. It's not going to be like forever, but he needs time to develop if he's going to reach that level, and he could do that at Tennessee. I don't want it to end up like this Kennedy Chandler situation. I mean, he just got cut by the Grizzlies right before the playoffs, and freaking Grizzlies losing to the Lakers. Don't get me started there. But
to be fair, Ja Morant did almost break his hand.
Hey, so. Yeah. Whole podcast I could do on that, honestly, with the Grizzlies. But, um, you just look at what happened with Kennedy Chandler and you just go, dude, you could have been on this team. That's a national championship team, man. That would have been the best backcourt in
Yeah.
America.
I don't know that
And
he would have improved his draft stock a ton because of his size. That was always going to be
probably
the
not.
biggest negative for him. But yeah, for sure. Why don't you come back and try to at least get to a Final Four, because that would have been so nice to have, especially when Zakai went down. To have Chandler there would have been incredible.
I mean, he just took the whole season and sat on the bench for the Grizzlies, and he made money, and that's awesome. And I always encourage that. I'm not blaming him. You do
No,
what is best for you. Period.
I bet if he
But
could do it over again, he'd probably might think a lot harder. I'm going to say for sure
I
that
do
he would,
wonder.
is I don't know what his paycheck looks like that he's getting in the NBA, and that could be tough to turn down. But with NIL stuff and the chance to compete for a championship, knowing the way things worked out in Memphis for him this season, I think he'd be hard pressed to not reverse his decision.
But it just seems like with the guys that are borderline NBA, like Phillips, they always just lean into, oh, well, you'll be late second round. Oh, you'll definitely get taken. Well, that doesn't mean that the situation is going to be good. Because at Tennessee, I mean, I don't know what Tennessee would be willing to ante up with NIL wise for Phillips, but I think given another year to develop, he could really be a great player. It's in there. It just has to be unleashed. Granted, I also say that, and I say I'm not sure he's a great fit for what Rick Barnes is doing.
And I say, will Barnes unleash him if he comes back?
And I, I don't know, man. I'm very skeptical there in the same. Like if he did come back, I don't know that that's the best decision for him. I mean, I honestly, I feel like I could almost see him stay in college and go somewhere else. Yeah, transfer away, which I want to talk about something that would just make me ill to my core. It would be that, but I could see it happening.
What about James? What's your opinion on what he should do? Because that, to me, that's the with the injury stuff, that's such a loaded question. I feel like with the injury stuff, but the impact he makes when he plays, but you can't count on him to be out there every single night, or at least the best version of himself every single night. Does it mess up the chemistry of the team when you're mixing these lineups, up and down with depending on his status? Where are you at there?
There would have to be some kind of guarantee of consistency, and that's just not there with him as a player. Because, yeah, to your point there, just the chemistry, like there were games where he would come in and be the dude for you. And then there were games where he would come in and just chuck up shots and just waste possessions and just, he was a flat out liability at times because he didn't play consistently enough. He was all over the place. So if there was some guarantee of consistency with Santiago Vescovi, there's a guarantee of consistency. If he comes back, he is probably going to drop in 10 to 20 a night and be one of the best guards in the SEC. That's essentially guaranteed as long as he's healthy. And he's had health problems too. There's the shoulder and everything that happened with him this year. Yeah, he's had that too. But there is an actual guarantee of consistency. And because of that, I probably lean like 55% let Triple J go. Just let him. Do I think the potential is there for him to have finally the incredible season that he could? Yeah, but what's the percent chance of that happening? 10%. And so I just almost I'm being cautious in saying that and just go like, just let him go. Just let him move on. But that is also contingent on you got to go to the transfer portal. Hello, Rick. Rick's transfer portal work, he's recruited incredibly. His recruiting has been legitimately elite in the last few years at Tennessee. His transfer portal work has been pretty bad. Really not good. This last year, it was Tyreek Key. The year before that, it was Uros Plavsic. And Key was fun for like 3 or 4 games, and then he didn't do a whole lot else besides that. And Uros Plavsic, firecracker out there, but he also gets you into a ton of trouble, doesn't really contribute that much offensively. We all know. We all watched him play. I got to see something there. Like, come on. And obviously, Olivier Kama, probably the most inconsistent dude on this entire team, but also at his best, one of the best guys on this entire team, transferring away. So you got to fill that. It's a concerning situation to me. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Next year's team's going to be a lot of young guys, and maybe Santiago Vescovi, and a few others. I mean, he's not going to be the only upperclassman, but like it's going to be. I think just projecting out. I think it's going to be. I think Scovey's the only one that returns. I think from everything that I've heard so far. That's a pretty new basketball team. That's a pretty different basketball team. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe. I'm honestly just not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you on Vescovi, and I do wonder. You kind of alluded to it. How does Barnes go to the collective and say, "Hey, we need Phillips back because this team's going to be young and he can really step up. Let's pay this kid whatever it takes to keep him." Or does he just kind of stay out of that? I could see Barnes being kind of old school and being like, I'm not paying anybody. If y'all want to figure this out, go for it. But I'm not getting involved in that. I think that's probably his approach. But no, I still maintain that I'm not too concerned yet, only because I'll let it play out. If we get to August or something, late July, August, and there hasn't been any movement, and it looks like this young roster that you're talking about with no additions or no legitimate additions that are going to make the team better, then yeah, okay, well, let's buckle up and see where this season goes. It could be Barnes' last ride if it's not, if he doesn't significantly upgrade the roster.
Yeah, Nug says Zakai will be back. That is huge. Yeah,
and hopefully he's back 100% by November. I mean, that's still
what I was going to say.
Was it late January or was it February when he tore his ACL? Whatever it was in the winter months. Late. Yeah, I mean that's.
I think you were talking
months to be back to 100% after a torn ACL. I mean, that's going to be close.
I would bet a chunk of change. I would be willing to do that Zakai probably doesn't come back at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, you should wait till conference play. I mean, that would be a conference play move. Yeah.
Yes, conference play, or maybe if you.
I don't know what the schedule looks like, but you lose a game in mid-November, it's not a big deal. It's really not.
And I don't know what the schedule is. Maybe if there's some big games in that non-con, maybe they try to work him back in there. Kind of like Triple J this past season. I could see it going like that. But yeah, in the long term, I mean, Zakai's your point guard for the next 2 years, and that's awesome. And he's going to be, before he leaves Tennessee, as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be the best point guard in the SEC before he leaves Tennessee. So this team is gonna probably look pretty different. Obviously, we'll talk about that when it comes. I tried to speak it into existence. It doesn't look like any news actually dropped while we were doing the show, unfortunately. We'll try again next week if we don't hear anything.
It'll happen right after we turn this off.
Exactly. Well, maybe we'll have to have a midweek segment then. That'll be okay. But just hello, somebody make a decision. I'd like to know what's happening with the basketball team. But we'll finish with baseball. Getting swept by Arkansas. This is a tough part of this conversation. You're kind of bordering on maybe missing the NCAA tournament with this baseball team. And we're going to talk about that right after I tell you about our final sponsor, Omaha Steaks. I got to hold on. They gave me a whole new fresh read here. Here it is right here. Omaha Steaks is rewriting the book on burgers with all new handmade texture for the juiciest homestyle burgers you have ever tasted. Their pure ground burgers are made from single cuts of real aged Omaha steaks. These are truly steaks on a bun. Filet mignon, ribeye, New York strip, sirloin, and even brisket burgers. Now is the time to experience the exclusive Burger Perfection flight. Go to omahasteaks.com and use promo code BALLS at checkout to get an extra $20 off orders of $129 or more, plus free shipping. Order today so you can try each pure ground burger and sample all of the steak on a bun greatness. These burgers are crafted for juicier, more tender experience, making your mouth water with every single bite. I've tried the regular burgers from Omaha Steaks, just kind of the Omaha Steaks burgers, and those are phenomenal. I mean, really, genuinely, I mean that. Yeah, it's an ad, but seriously, they've sent them to me. They're really, really good. So I can only imagine that these are incredible. So get your hands on them. Don't wait. Go to omahasteaks.com. Use promo code Balls at checkout to get an extra $20 off orders of $129 or more and discover your new burger obsession. Minimum order may be required. omahasteaks.com. Promo code Vols. Support them because they support us. And also, I mean, those steaks and burgers are amazing. So the baseball team goes and gets annihilated by Arkansas. I mean, it's pretty much that simple. They had some early leads in those first two games, like a 2-0 lead in one and a 1-0 lead in the other, and then just got blown out of the water. That first game was close, but outside of that, I mean, it just wasn't. It's probably the worst major game of the season for Beam. They switched up the pitchers finally. Andrew Lindsay came in. He was the starter on Friday. Really put in an admirable effort, and then the defense sucked it up and lost the game for you. So and as I said, you're now bordering on. You might be looking at no NCAA tournament. No, it's not a given. And the schedule gets easier from here. You've basically played an absolute murderer's row of teams in the last few weeks. But I mean, how concerned are you, Zach?
Well, for this season, I'm very concerned. I don't see it turning around. I don't think it's going to have this magical ending. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see it. Long term, I'm not that concerned because I'm a baseball guy. I've seen so many baseball teams do incredible things one season from all levels, and then you lose a couple of guys. You replace them with similar production, and on paper it makes sense, and then it just doesn't work. For whatever reason, the chemistry's not there. And baseball is such a chemistry sport. Like, it's so important. The clubhouse, the vibe. You start losing confidence, you get in a slump, you're pressing. It's really hard to come up with those key hits. It's really hard to play defense when you're not playing loose and free and you're worried about making an error. That's when the errors always happen. And Tony Vitello pretty much questioned his team's toughness after this Arkansas series and wondered if they're tough enough to win in this league and to win the games that they have to win and just baseball in general. And to me, that was quite telling. And I think that's a lot of the issue. I just don't think this group that they've put together gels the way they need to. There's talent there. Like, the talent is there on paper for this team to be really good. And at some point, Tony Vitello will have to, bear the responsibility of this season, or if it continues down the road in subsequent seasons. But there's only so much he can do when you're in the moment. Like, you can't change the vibe of a clubhouse. You cannot change the attitude of a dugout or just the vibe. None of that's like, you can't do that with just a snap of fingers. I mean, there's certain things that Vitello can do strategically during games that he can try, like he did this weekend by, mixing up the pitching staff. And kudos to him for trying that and not just going to the same old thing that he'd been doing all season, because that's just the way it's supposed to be. Dolander's the 2022 SEC Pitcher of the Year, so we're going to leave him in that Friday slot no matter what. Like, he showed a willingness to evolve, and we've seen that with some other lineup decisions at times this year. But Maui Ahuna hasn't been who you thought he'd be. He really only got like Blake Burke that's consistently, hitting the ball out, where last season it just felt like it was everybody in the lineup at some point could do it whenever you needed it. So the consistency hasn't been there, and I just think it's just not the right group of players for this Tennessee team. And maybe that was a miscalculation on Vitello's part. Maybe it's just bad luck. I mean, that does happen in baseball, and I don't think it's a nail in the coffin for this program by any means. Like I said, long term, I'm not concerned, because Vitello's done some incredible things. It wasn't just last season, I mean, the couple of years before that as well, or at least the year before, was a really good season. And I think if he can just get better personalities that fit his culture and his program a little, more of those guys, basically, I think they'll be fine. But for this season, man, unless they just flip a switch that I don't know exists, it's going to be hard to see them turning this thing around. Especially like once you get swept and lose this many consecutive series, it's really hard to come back from that. Really hard.
I mean, baseball is definitely the prime sport for saying, like, as of this moment, they are X. Because you've seen Ole Miss last season. Didn't really have a great regular season, wins the national championship. Same with Mississippi State the year before. That can absolutely happen, where you just hit some kind of special gear and the ball rolls the way you want it to roll. And that can happen. But I think I'm in agreement with you, Zach. At the moment, I'm just not sure they got it. I just don't think they do. And it's really unfortunate because I think what you're probably going to see, I mean, you got Vandy this weekend. That's going to be sold out. It's Vandy. That's a given. Mississippi State the next weekend, and that's going to be big.
It's a tough league, man. It's a really tough league.
But here's the honest God truth. With football being back, and I know Tennessee fans don't really want to like talk about this, but like it's the truth. With football being back, if baseball's not good, all the ticket sales and the new stadium and the whole thing, there's not going to be nearly as much enthusiasm for all of that because people are going to go, oh, that was a fun season, and now I'm going to go watch football because that's Tennessee. That has been Tennessee historically, and don't act like we've changed our stripes. This is still a football school. You see him in basketball. Basketball has had really fun seasons with Rick Barnes, and just because he just doesn't go out there and drum up enthusiasm and do all of those things. And at the end of the day, Tennessee fans, so many of them are just football fans. And so basketball, like, it has to be something truly like out of this world special to get people to be uber enthusiastic about it. And I think that's going to apply to baseball. Maybe I'm wrong. There. And I don't want to like saddle Vitello with that because I love Tony Vitello. He is arguably, at this moment, the best major sport coach Tennessee has. And I also agree with you. Long term, I'm not worried about Vitello. He has shown up to this point that he can build something really special, and I think he's still going to do it at Tennessee. I think he just misfired this season. So far, again, baseball is like the king of, as of this point, we're not good, but we'll see in the future. But, it just seems like, and folks are saying it in the comments here, Ahuna's a bust. So far, maybe he turns a corner. And just some of the stuff like that, it just is what it is. But I mean, Nug says it here. Vol can't change his checkers. Vitello, I don't want to say like Vitello needs to watch out, but in some sense, like, you can't be bad at baseball at Tennessee and have anyone come. It's not built in like that. It's just not at Tennessee. And so that scares me a little bit with this. That I would say it'll take till next season for that drop off to happen. It's built in for the rest of this year. But per se, they missed the NCAA tournament this year, and then it really doesn't get that much better next year. That enthusiasm just gonna skydive. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But I think it's a reality that we probably got to mention because that really is the case. If football is going to be good like this, Tennessee fans are going to go watch football, and they're not really going to lose a lot of sleep over the baseball team. So just, some food for thought there. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that they do turn some corner and figure it out and find some chemistry, but it's not looking like that's going to happen.
No, and if we're being honest, I think we should have all seen this coming to some extent. When you lose that many players that were such big personalities and so clutch, your Jordan Becks and Drew Gilberts and Trey Lipscombs, and there was just a ton of talent that they lost from that team. And you're almost coming in with a brand new team, and then you're putting the expectations of 2021 and 2022 on this set of kids. And they're trying to live up to that pressure. They're trying to live up to the reputation that Tennessee earned the last couple of years. They're trying to be those villains. And it's not, I'm not going to say it's not who they are, but that's a lot of pressure. I mean, that is a ton of pressure to try to live up to.
Yeah, it's not who they are.
And maybe, to play devil's advocate to my point earlier saying I don't think they're going to turn it around. Mr. Jones mentions here that, Tennessee was the number one seed last year and the pressure was too much. Maybe with less expectations, they can go in and shock everyone.
Yeah, that is one thing.
Yeah, right.
That's the thing.
But that is one thing. At this point right now, they fell out of the top 25 this week after getting swept by Arkansas, at least in, I think, D1's rankings. At some point, the pressure's off because everybody's like, okay, this Tennessee's not going to turn it around. When the pressure's off and the expectations go away, you kind of feel a little bit of relief and you can go out there and kind of be yourself and just play baseball. And that's when good things can start happening. So maybe maybe that happens. I mean, that's like the one silver lining here with this getting swept by Arkansas. Maybe they can turn it around and do like an Ole Miss or Mississippi State, and put it all together. Because, like we said, the talent is there. They're not on the same page. I mean, when you see teams making errors like that, it just tells you that the vibe is just not where it needs to be.
Well, you have the perfect opportunity to turn it around because Vanderbilt coming in, they're a good team. I believe they won the series against South Carolina, and South Carolina is having a really good year. I want to say, what is Vandy? They're probably number one in the SEC East at the moment. But you're playing them in Lindsey Nelson. Now, Florida kicked your butt for 2 games in Lindsey Nelson 2 weeks ago, so don't let that happen again. Turn it on against Vandy. Beat this Vandy team. And then especially, I mean, Mississippi State at this point, they have a worse record than Tennessee does. Turn it on against Mississippi State. That's in Lindsey Nelson too. That's in Knoxville. Go win that series. And then I think we'll still be cooking. That'll be okay. Yeah, Vandy, 29-7 overall. They've won 6 more games than Tennessee. And I think they won the series against South Carolina. So I think they're number 1 in the SEC East. I mean, this is the perfect opportunity to knock off a big team. A team that's having a better season than you, and it's at home. So go beat them. Go beat Mississippi State the next week, and then things that could be the turning point. Maybe this is the go have a closed door team only meeting and figure something out. I'm not sure that's gonna happen. Please, I'm begging you. Please do it.
If you can take 2 out of 3 from Vandy, I think you win that Friday game. And that can really help you build some momentum. You lose that Friday game, I think the pressure is just going to get even bigger. But you win 2 out of 3 against Vandy and sweep Mississippi State, or even win 2 out of 3 against them, and you're back on track, and you can kind of take off from there. But I mean, this is a pivotal point of the season, really, if you're going to make some noise in the postseason.
Yeah, this is big. I mean, I'll put it this way: this is the biggest series of the season. You swept these boys last year. Not only you didn't just sweep them, you swept them in the regular season, then you beat them in the SEC tournament, and you kind of broke their morale last year. And now you have another chance to have a series against Vandy kind of be a turning point in one way or another. It could kind of solidify the fact that you're going nowhere, or it could kind of be the motivation you need going forward if you can get a big win over a team having a better season than you. So we'll see. No pressure. Hopefully they can pull it off. I think that's it. Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan. Thank you to everybody who watched, commented. Mr. Jones, Ben is in here commenting. Now John Hill, as always, he's telling folks to hit the like button, and we really appreciate it. Nug, Salem, Ashton, thank you to anyone and everyone for watching. We are incredibly humbled and appreciative for watching this, for watching the live stream from the field at Neyland Stadium over the weekend. And we'll be back maybe for a midweek segment. Not totally sure, but watch out for that on the A to Z Sports Nashville YouTube channel. Anything else for the folks at home, Zach, before we bounce?
No, that should about cover it. Ben Hall was in here talking about some of the stuff that Vitello said Sunday. We talked about that a little bit earlier. He definitely did call out their toughness, and you combine that comment with also a comment he made a few weeks ago about their plate appearances and not being aggressive enough, basically, and just looking at strike 3 and not having competitive at bats. And you can definitely sense the frustration with Vitello with this team.
Absolutely. Just go out there and be Vandy. That's all I'll say. Go ahead and do it, because first of all, it's a long off season. We're going to need something to talk about, and if the baseball team doesn't make the NCAA tournament, what are we going to talk about? So please do that. I need it. Thanks again to everybody. Can't appreciate you enough. You guys are way too good to us. Charlie Burrows, Zach Reagan, A to Z Sports.com, yada, yada, yada. You know where to go. Yeah, that's it. We'll talk to y'all maybe later this week, maybe next week. We'll talk to y'all then.
See you guys later.